The group of people climbed higher and higher, and the leader shouted to the others that there was only a little bit left, so they needed to push harder to reach their goal. And then the man with the red flag, which meant he was the one leading everyone, started telling some boy to go up faster and not to fall behind, because in such remote places people should always stick together for their own safety. It was obvious how difficult it was for this guy, because not everyone can climb to the top of the mountain, because all people have different physical abilities, so you need to soberly assess your strength. The young man explained that he was trying, but if there was not enough preparation, then you couldn't get very far on effort alone, so no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't catch up with the others. Meanwhile, the little children mocked the hero, saying that he was the weakest adult they had ever seen, because even though they were younger, they did not look tired at all, but on the contrary, full of strength and desire to move on. Then the man turned to the boy, addressing him as Mr. Writer, and then asked why he couldn't cope, since even the girls from elementary school were doing well, unlike the young man. Then the writer explained that because of his profession, he leads a sedentary lifestyle, preferring to stay at home rather than engage in any kind of sport, which is why he gets tired so quickly, because he is not used to being physically active. The hero remembered how comfortable he felt at home, where he didn't have to strain himself, but could just lie on a soft bed and play games without spending a lot of strength and energy. It turned out that the young man was happy to lie under the air conditioner in his house with all the conditions for life. But it so happened that his editor dragged the writer to the mountains, which the hero himself was not particularly happy about. The young man was already dreaming about how he would punish the editor for such an act, and the punishment consisted of the writer forcing him to reread his drafts, which seemed like an excellent revenge. And then the stick, which served as the only support for the young man, helping him to move, suddenly crunched with a characteristic sound, which was an unforeseen situation, because the guy believed in it too much to think that it could break, and because the young man was directing all his weight onto his support, as soon as it disappeared, which is logical. He himself was unable to stay on his feet, starting to fall. The guy realized too late what situation he was in, so he only had time to be scared of his fall. But it was very difficult to do anything at that moment. The writer never found another support, because there was an impermissibly short time for this. So having done nothing, the young man could not save himself in any way, so he began to fall from a great height. And then he thought that most likely, this would be his end. The young man extended his hand in the hope that there was still a chance to grab onto something, but he still understood that he could not save himself, no matter what he did. He was on the verge of death. And as they usually say, his whole life flashed before his eyes, forcing him to think about what he was wasting his life on, which is given to everyone only once. At that moment, the writer realized that instead of dreaming of power in another world, he should look at life more realistically, because not everyone can take off their rose-colored glasses. But sooner or later, they were still destined to fight. The hero realized that he should have taken a more responsible approach to his life, and not been distracted by all sorts of nonsense while working. But unfortunately, he realized this too late. No one tried to help the young man, and saving him would most likely have been very difficult. So he still began to fall from a high mountain, not knowing where it would lead him. The young man had to fall for a long time, because he was far from the ground, and now he was falling into the unknown, unsure that he would be able to survive. When the hero fell off the cliff, he was able to open his eyes and then realized that it turned out that he had survived such a terrible fall, which was a real miracle. And then the young man realized that he had not just fallen, because someone had managed to tie his hands with a rope in a strong knot, and it was unclear who did it and why. While the guy was coming to his senses after waking up, he suddenly felt something dripping onto his forehead, so he decided to track where this drop came from. Gathering his strength, the hero looked up, and then he saw something that struck him so much that it was surprising that he had not noticed it before. The young man noticed a girl who was drooling on him, and that is why something dripped on the man, because the stranger was practically hanging over him. The girl was dressed very strangely, in something that looked like a tiger skin, and her clothes did not look like what ordinary people wear, because they were sloppy and very revealing. The hero tried to calm himself down by saying that she was also a human being, just like him, so she wouldn't eat him. But he couldn't believe these words, so it was becoming more and more difficult to control himself and not scream. And then the stranger began to speak in her own language, which was incomprehensible to the writer, so he did not even guess that the girl was talking about how tender his meat was. Although the guy hoped that they wouldn't eat him, the savage was thinking about how delicious it would be when she roasted this man, imagining how juicy the meat would be if it was cooked properly. The writer didn't understand what the girl was talking about, but he still guessed that it wouldn't end well, because it looked like he would soon become a stake. The hero began to think that, apparently, the heavens wanted him to suffer longer, and that is why they did not allow him to simply die from falling off a cliff, and now they would most likely eat him. The stranger had already taken out her sword and began to approach the young man closer and closer with a hungry smile, continuing to drool. And now the guy sees the weapon almost before his eyes, realizing that this time he definitely won't be able to escape, because it's hard to negotiate with someone who is going to eat you. And then it turned out that the stranger wanted to cut not the hero with the blade, but the rope with which his hands were tied, and she did this in order to free him, not to kill him. This act greatly surprised the writer, who already thought that the end had come for him and mentally said goodbye to his life, because he was sure that he would soon be killed and eaten. And then the unknown woman said that although she was very hungry, even in this case she was not going to eat a person. When the hero realized that they were not going to eat him, he finally decided to take a closer look at the stranger who had recently scared him a lot. And only then did he notice that the girl was not an ordinary person, because her ears were more reminiscent of a cat or another animal than human. And then the man realized that not only did the stranger have unusual ears, but it was also surprising that she had a tail. Although the heroine resembled a human, spoke, and walked on two legs, it turned out that she was not human. Then the young man thought that since he saw such a creature, he most likely found himself in another world, because there could be no other possible scenarios. The young man began to think that since he was a writer, he didn't see anything strange in what was happening. But he was outraged by the fact that there were hundreds of interesting ways to die, and he was left with gravity. As a result, the hero decided that he needed to pull himself together and learn more about this place, because any information would be very important now, so that there would be more chances to survive in this unfamiliar world. The first thing the man did was look around, trying to understand where he was now, because he was wondering where fate had thrown him. The hero didn't really appreciate the interior of the room, concluding that the place he was currently in wasn't very good. The writer was accustomed to his cozy home with all the amenities, so what surrounded him at the moment seemed too impractical and old-fashioned. Having managed to stand up, the hero noticed the light that was pouring out from the exit, so the guy began to walk towards this light. As a result, the young man decided to look out into the street to assess the situation and understand what the world looked like, into which he had been so unexpectedly brought. What the boy saw surprised him greatly, because the first thing that caught his eye were two running creatures that looked like a fox and a bird, who seemed to be playing tag. Later, he noticed other creatures that walked with spears and wore animal skins. It was then that the main character realized that he found himself in a primitive society, which was evident from his clothes, behavior, and dwellings. And then someone nearby began to say something, but the young man did not understand a word of what he heard. The writer automatically turned around in search of the source of the noise, and what he saw slightly frightened him. After all, he saw a tall man who asked about the hero's name and where he was from and why he came to the village of Yanlong. But the young man, of course, did not understand what they wanted from him. After this, the girl turned to this man, calling him Dad, and he evaporated her, telling her to call him Captain in front of strangers. Then the heroine said okay, and then called the man Dad again, which made him a little angry because they weren't listening to him. And while the father and daughter were talking, the hero stood rooted to the spot, because this language was unknown to him, so he simply did not know what to do and what was happening. So the young man was still lost in his thoughts, thinking that he had actually ended up in a primitive society, which was something unimaginable. Meanwhile, the stranger asked the captain why the man was silent, and then concluded that it was her dad who had scared him, to which the man himself replied that since the guy was gentle and thin, he was most likely from a big village. After this, the captain added that the shaman wanted to take a look at the guest of their village, so they needed to take the hero to him. While the heroes were walking, the writer attracted all eyes, because he was different from the others, which is what attracted attention, as usually happens. And the young man thought about where he had ended up, because in his world nothing like this could exist. Wherever he looked, there were tails and horns everywhere. The creatures in turn were surprised that the hero had no wings, no horns, no tail, and that his meat was so tender, without a single muscle, so he definitely didn't look like a fighter. The dwellings in this village looked very primitive, so that even from them alone one could tell that the writer found himself in a primitive society. And this society was definitely not on the hero's native land, but since he was a writer, it was not so difficult for him to come to terms with the rebirth, and although falling off a cliff was a boring method, it was quite rare. The question remained of what the young man should do next. And then he decided that the main thing was not to panic and to watch everything carefully, because he definitely wouldn't be able to escape. The hero also remembered that there were animal bones lying around everywhere, but there were no human bones there, which was good news. And the creatures that inhabited this place stared at the guy, more for scientific reasons than for gastronomic ones, and even let him sleep, which means that they are definitely not cannibals, so nothing bad will happen to the hero. And then the commander said something to the young man. However, the young man once again did not understand anything, because this language was unfamiliar to him. It was clear that the hero didn't understand anything, but the others still hadn't figured it out, and that trying to talk to him was useless. Ignoring the boy's confused expression, the man continued to say something, confident that he was understood. The hero began to wave his hands to show by his appearance that he did not understand a word. Then the man stopped trying to explain everything to the writer in words, and simply pointed his hand in a certain direction. It turned out that the man pointed to a dwelling that was the largest and most beautiful in the entire settlement, so one could guess that someone of high rank lived there. And then we learn that there lives a shaman who will not last long, and therefore he wants to find a new shaman for the creatures. But everyone in the tribe has already tried to pass the test, but no one has a talent for magic. Therefore, the creatures did not know what to do next, because if they did not find a new shaman, the tribe would die out. And then they remembered that of those who were not tested for magic, only the stranger remained, whom the creatures found 3 days ago. Therefore, the shaman ordered that the young man be brought to him so that he could try, since there were no other options left. So the writer was the only chance to save the tribe. It was because of this test that the hero was brought to the shaman so that he too could pass the test of magic. When the hero entered the dwelling, he noticed a man who was sitting in the middle, and the others were standing around him. So the writer guessed that this man was most likely their leader. The shaman began to wave his hand invitingly to the young man, and he, in turn, was surprised that their leader was calling him to him, wanting the writer to come closer. Then the young man began to timidly approach the man, who continued to call him to himself, although the guy did not know why he was being given such attention. The hero began to think that the old man looked weak, and if something went wrong, he would simply take him hostage to save himself, because he knew for what purpose he was called. The writer slowly approached the shaman, not knowing what would happen next, and because of this, he was nervous, ready to attack at any moment. The old man sat with his eyes closed and did not say a word, making the young man worry even more with his inaction, because the unknown is always frightening. And then the shaman suddenly opened his eyes, and the amazing thing was that a weak blue light was pouring out of them, thereby illuminating every wrinkle of the elderly man. This light captured the writer, and it happened so quickly and unexpectedly that the young man did not even carry out his plan to attack the old man if necessary. The young man felt as if he was falling. The whole room started spinning and began to disappear, dissolving into the darkness. The dwelling finally disappeared from the hero's field of vision, and he began to fly in an unknown space, not knowing what was happening or what to do. The writer turned out to be the only one floating in this dark, mysterious nothingness, vaguely reminiscent of space. But he was definitely not in space, because he could breathe. And suddenly he began to be surrounded by fire, which literally came from nowhere. The flames captured the hero's gaze, and he stared at the fire without stopping, as if this would help him learn something secret. And then it turned out that it was not just a flame, because someone's silhouette began to appear in it. And then the young man realized that there was someone or something in the fire. At that moment, a shaman appeared next to the guy and asked the young man if he saw it, without explaining what he meant, because he knew that the writer would understand him. And then the young man asked where the old man came from, and then asked where he was located, because the guy still did not understand what was happening and why he began to understand the language of the shaman. The old man explained that at the moment the heroes were in the depths of the writer's soul, and then added that now he would pass on their language to the young man so that the boy could understand the others. And after that the shaman asked again whether the writer saw this, still without specifying what he was talking about. The young man, unsure whether this was what he was being asked about, said that there was either a dragon or a snake inside the flame, since that was most likely what the old man was asking about, to which the old man simply replied that it was excellent. In reality, the writer was not in any unknown space, but continued to be in the room with his eyes closed, as if he was simply sleeping. And then he suddenly woke up, abruptly opening his eyes and starting to look around, not fully understanding what had just happened. Next to him was a shaman who raised his staff and shouted "Subai." After this, the old man pointed at the writer and told him that the boy was now a resident of Yanlong village, and would also become the next shaman. The writer noticed that he now understood a previously unknown language, And he was also very surprised that all these words were addressed specifically to him, because they pointed at him with a staff. This greatly surprised the commander, who did not expect that an ordinary stranger would become such an important figure as a shaman. This news shocked not only the man, but also his daughter, who also saw and heard everything that happened. All the creatures rejoiced at the fact that they had a new manam, because it meant that their tribe would not perish. However, even among the happy heroes there were those who were not very happy with the old shaman's choice, because he chose some child to take his place, and it was unclear whether he would be able to replace the old man, but they still had no other options. And then the commander took the writer's side, saying that he believed in the choice of their shaman. And while everyone was discussing this news, the young man himself did not share the joy of the others, because no one even asked his opinion. The hero had just entered the new world when he immediately became a shaman, so he didn't even know what to do next, because it was all new to him. The writer was brought out of his stupor by the girl he saw first in the new world, and she grabbed the hero, dragging him somewhere with her. The guy did not resist and obediently followed the heroine, who persistently led him in an unknown direction. Others, meanwhile, were discussing the new shaman, saying that his name Subai was very strange, and they were also wondering what tribe he came from. And while some were discussing, others were simply happy that they had a shaman, which meant that nothing would happen to their totem. Thanks to the writer, everyone was happy that they would not become outcasts and would not disappoint their ancestors. And the young man still did not understand how he was suddenly made a shaman, and whether this was normal at all. And then the girl reassured the guy that he was chosen by the great shaman himself, not someone else, but him. Then the heroine added that since the shaman said so, it was the right decision, because one cannot doubt his decisions. The girl said this so confidently and enthusiastically that she even started pointing her finger at the guy, thus reinforcing her statement. The heroine introduced herself as Yanhua, and then added that she would now be keeping an eye on the new shaman, so if he had any questions, he could feel free to ask them. It was clear that Yanhua was happy with the task that had been entrusted to her, as she was eagerly awaiting questions. Then the young man asked the girl to tell him more about the tribe, and she began to say that the tribe was called Yanlong, and their totem too, but she could not describe it, so when the time came, he would find out for himself. The writer guessed that what he saw in that fire was the Yanlong totem. After the heroine's story, the young man asked her to tell him about his duties in the tribe. The hero himself noticed that the girl's father is a chief, but he listens to the shaman. So it turns out that the shaman occupies a leading role. Yanhua was very surprised by this question, because what tribe was the guy from if he didn't even know such things? Then the heroine explained that the shaman is the strongest person in the tribe, and the tribe cannot survive if it does not have a shaman. After the shaman comes the leader, who is the girl's father, and bears the name Yanku. And after the leader come the main hunters, who possessed incredible strength. The tribe also includes totem soldiers, reserve soldiers, and common people. And then the guy noticed that although there were few people in this tribe, there were enough different positions. It was obvious that this remark hurt the girl. And then she explained that there used to be many more people in their settlement. Yanhua began to gather her thoughts to tell another story, but all the joy on the heroine's face disappeared. The story began with the fact that the Yanlong tribe people used to live on the fertile land left by their ancestors, and then there was plenty of everything, including water and food. Then there was a source of water near the people, and they also never went hungry. At that time they were a huge tribe, for there were 300 of them, 65 of whom were strong soldiers. However, their happy life did not last forever, because 6 months ago they were attacked by the Black Snake tribe, and they destroyed the hunting grounds of the Yanlong tribe, and many of its inhabitants died that day. But what is worst of all, the people lost their fertile land. Because the heroes were unable to resist the Black Snake tribe, they had to move to the place where they are now. The girl confidently said that she had to become stronger in order to save her comrades languishing in captivity, and then return the lands of her ancestors. While Yanhua screamed that she would avenge every dead person, the writer silently thought about everything he had just heard. After this, the heroes moved away from the sadness, and went to look around the area so that the new shaman would know where he would now have to live. And although the tribe lost its fertile lands, it was clear that the heroine loved the place where they were currently staying. This is how the heroes spent their time, while Yanhua showed the guy where everything was, because it was important for him to know all this. After the walk, the young man realized how things were, and concluded that things were as bad as they could be for this tribe. Almost all the inhabitants were thin and pale, so it was clear that they clearly did not have enough food and were starving. The amount of food given per person was negligible, so everyone was undernourished, which was sad. Another problem was that the weather conditions, coupled with the lack of hygiene, created an ideal environment for the spread of bacteria. And if an epidemic begins, the consequences will be terrible, and many will not be able to survive. The situation was so difficult that the new shaman did not even know where to start in order to somehow help the others. And then the guy heard some sound and a head, which indicated that the daily auxiliary system was loading. Something actually started loading, and then a message appeared saying that the daily support system had been activated. The download was successful, so a sign with this system appeared in front of the young man. The hero thought that because he was a writer, he knew that this would happen, because where would it be without it? So he decided to try to control it with the power of thought, asking the system about what functions there were. Then the young man heard the functions currently available to him, after which the system said that he needed to check in every day to receive random newbie sets. Every time a hero checks in, there is a small chance of getting a medium set, and a very small chance of getting an advanced set. The monthly mark is guaranteed to give an average set, and the annual mark is guaranteed to give an advanced set. And while the system was saying that other support groups would open after the first year, the writer realized that the help was not as thick as he expected. After all, the guy doesn't have a whole year to wait, because during that time, the entire tribe will die of hunger. And then the young man stopped abruptly, because suddenly some thought came into his head. It turned out that the young man became interested in whether others could see the system's interface, and then he learned that only the owner himself could see it. Then the writer turned his attention to the girl, who was indignant that they were not listening to her, and that she was talking about the tribe when she could be training. And then the new shaman apologized, trying to get out of this situation, saying that he had not listened carefully because he was a little dizzy. However, this did not convince Manhwa, and she ordered the boy to remain silent, and then called him along with her to take the young man to a place where he could rest. And then the heroine took the young man to one of the huts that were located in this settlement. After that, Yanhui sat down next to the tiger's fur, which vaguely resembled a bed. The shaman asked if he would live here now, looking around and realizing that it was not at all like the house he had lived in before. The girl seemed embarrassed by this question, and then timidly answered that perhaps it would be better for him here. The young man did not pay attention to the heroine's sudden change in mood, telling her that he was very tired and would finally be able to rest. After that, the guy jumped onto this semblance of a bed, and didn't even notice that Yanhua wasn't very happy about it. But then the girl resigned herself to the fact that the shaman could not be stopped, so she simply continued to sit quietly. And then the writer sniffed the tiger's skin, and then realized that it smelled strange. In the end, he thought the smell was a bit like milk, so he liked it. At that moment, the heroine suddenly attacked the young man, shouting that he should not sniff the tiger's skin, and not touch anything there at all. The writer did not foresee such an impulse from the girl, so he was very surprised at how sharply she reacted to such simple actions. And then Yanhui explained her reaction by saying that she was sleeping in the very place where the new shaman was now lying. After this confession from the girl, the writer began to think about it all, realizing that the heroes were now in an awkward position. It was clear that the situation had become tense, as this could be felt in Yanhua's behavior. And since the heroine suggested that the guy stay in her hut, this means that now they will have to live together. The young man was not embarrassed by the fact that the girl had horns and a tail, so he did not pay attention to them. All these features were offset by the fact that Yanhua had a body and face that looked quite good in the writer's opinion. So, having considered all the pros and cons, the young man decided that he would still stay and live with the heroine. The girl was outraged by this attitude towards herself, and also by the fact that the hero behaved as if he was being begged to live in this hut, and so Yanhua asked him who needed him at all to behave like that. After this, the heroine added that she had to go on patrol tonight anyway, so she was leaving, and then added that the writer should not touch her things, otherwise he would get hit on the head. And the young man was touched by how the girl scolded him, because even though she looked grown up, she was very easily embarrassed. As soon as Yanhua left, the hero immediately decided that it was time for him to get down to business. So he told the system that he wanted to check in, to which he heard in response that the check-in was successful. Then the writer pressed the first day button, and the system started telling him that he would soon receive a reward. The system congratulated the hero, because he received an average set of support, which included treatment, and then the guy thought that since he received an average set, it was luck. And then he thought about whether this was a guaranteed reward for the first mark. And then the young man decided to open the character panel and saw all his characteristics, including the name Subai, endurance of 0.7, strength and speed of about the same level, spiritual powers of level 2.1, work as a writer, and the recently acquired ability of healing of the first level. Then the guy realized that his characteristics were so this most likely would not be enough for him to survive in this cruel world. so he would need to take care of himself. Meanwhile, at such a late hour, light was pouring out of the old shaman's hut, which meant that its occupant was not sleeping. It turned out that at that time the old man was sitting thoughtfully not alone, but together with the leader of the tribe. In his hands, the old shaman held something that most likely helped him in magic. And then the commander said that they didn't know where Subai came from, so it was doubtful that he could really become a shaman. And then the old man explained that they had no time left to choose, because no one from their tribe possessed magic, only the stranger who had suddenly appeared. After his words, the shaman began to cough heavily, which greatly frightened the chieftain, who began to say that the old man needed to take care of his health and pay more attention to himself. And then the great shaman said that no matter how hard he tried to prevent it, he had no more than a couple of days left, so it was useless to try to do anything. It turned out that the man believed that the tribe had brought the shaman a lot of problems, because if they had been stronger, the old man would not have suffered during the raid of the Black Snake tribe. And then the shaman calmed the chief, telling him not to worry about it, because now there are much more important things. The old man asked the commander to hold the succession ceremony in 3 days. However, the chief doubted this, because it seemed to him that the old man was in too much of a hurry, because they knew nothing about Subai, and he could be from the Black Snake tribe. But the great shaman was sure that the Black Snake tribe would not be able to raise such a kind and honest child. Also, let's not forget that Subai was chosen as the new shaman after they looked into his soul. And in the writer's soul there is simply no malice. It is pure, like rainwater that has not yet reached the ground. The old man decided that Subai was most likely from a legendary tribe, so he needed to be protected until he decided to do evil. And while the writer was being discussed, he himself slept soundly on his new bed, not suspecting anything. The great shaman was able to convince the chief that Subai was a good man, so the commander decided to begin preparations for the ceremony. Just as Yanhua's father was about to leave, the old man remembered something else he wanted to tell him. Then the chief received information that the descendants of shamans often inherit their abilities, so it would be better if the shaman had more children. The commander assured the old man that he need not worry, because the man would do everything in the best possible way. And when the chief began to leave the dwelling of the great shaman, he noticed his daughter, who was sitting very close to the hut. The man realized that his daughter had most likely been eavesdropping on the dialogue between him and the shaman the entire time. Then Yanhua began to justify herself, saying that she was just on patrol and therefore passed by, but did not hear anything. But after that, the chief calmed his daughter down, telling her that he didn't care whether she heard anything or not, and then added that he had a very important task for Yanhua. The heroine was glad that her father finally recognized her strength, so she was ready for any tasks to prove that she could do everything. But the commander's face did not show the same joy as the face of the still unsuspecting girl. And then the man told his daughter to become the young shaman's woman and bear his child, the more the better. After hearing this, the girl stared at one point with a surprised look, thinking about everything she had just heard. When the heroine realized everything, she began to scold her father, because they had already discussed the fact that Yanhua would only marry a man who was stronger than her. This means that the young shaman has no chance at all because he is skin and bones, so there is no way he can win in battle. Then the father began to curse in response, asking the heroine how many people she knew who were stronger than her, and then added that she would kill the poor guy if she tried to fight him. Then, in a serious and calm tone, the man told his daughter to stop arguing, because she was already 19, so in any case it was time to have children, and at the same time, she would serve the tribe. But it was clear that Yanhua was not very happy with these words, and so she explained to her father that she did not care about the children, because she wanted to become stronger and avenge her tribe. And then she added that if the commander wanted it that way, then let him marry the shaman himself. When the heroine shared her opinion about this whole situation, she quickly started running away, and her father had to shout after her to stop. The shaman silently watched this entire dispute, listening to everything that the father and daughter were arguing about. The old man was surprised that the young ones still had so much strength, and then he thought that he would really like to see what would happen to this tribe next. And even though the great shaman has only a short time left to live, he will still try to do everything possible to ensure that the tribe has a happy future. After the young shaman had slept, and when he woke up, he had to crawl out of the hut, and all because the writer was very cold because it was really freezing outside, and he was dressed very lightly for such weather. After this, the guy began to doubt that people lived in these huts, because the buildings were full of holes and cracks. Because of this, the hero was so cold that he almost froze to death. The young man decided that something had to be done about this, because this couldn't go on every night. Then Subai noticed that Yanhua had returned, so he asked her to bring more straw. It seemed that the girl was in no hurry to get the straw, continuing to simply look at the young shaman. Then she seemed to come to her senses, realizing that the young shaman had asked her for something. The dialogue with her father was still in the heroine's thoughts, so as soon as she saw the writer, she immediately imagined the many children that the leader asked her about. Unexpectedly for the young man, the heroine began to beat him and scream that she definitely wanted a bigger man. The young man didn't understand what Manhwa meant, so he asked her again to bring some straw, thinking that she simply didn't hear. It was then that the heroine finally understood the request, and so she asked why the guy needed straw. The young shaman explained that there were many holes in the girl's home, so they needed to be patched up, and for this, he needed straw. The heroine then understood what was going on, and then said that so be it, she would help the young man. Then it seemed to the young man that the girl began to behave much worse, and he did not understand what was happening to her. Subai had no idea about the dialogue between Manhwa and her father, so he continued to be confused and even beaten. And then the young man noticed something that completely caught his attention, causing him to stop. It turned out that the young shaman saw people who were sleeping not even in a hut, but simply under something that looked like a canopy. These were very young creatures who curled up into balls because they were very cold. And then the writer asked the heroine why someone was sleeping on the street, because they didn't even have anything to cover themselves with. Then Manhwa explained that few people have a home, and the skins are very valuable, so everyone takes care of themselves. But the hero should not worry, because his life is much more important. From the expression on the young shaman's face, it was clear that he was not particularly happy with the news he had just heard. In the end, the heroine did help the writer find the straw, so at that moment the heroes were walking, holding it in their hands. And then, unexpectedly, the young man did not carry the straw to his new hut, but put it instead of a blanket for those who slept outside, because it was much colder for them. Yanhui did not understand this action, asking the writer why he gave all the straw to others, because he is a shaman, which means that it is much more important. Then Subai explained everything to the girl by saying that the lives of others are as valuable as his own. These words made the heroine think, so much so that she could not even say anything in response to this statement. At that moment, the heroine realized that the young shaman was not what she had initially thought, because his personality began to be revealed by his actions. And then someone started shouting throughout the entire settlement that the hunters had returned. And the hunters returned not empty-handed, but with prey, which greatly pleased everyone who was eagerly awaiting them. Everyone was happy because they saw how much food the hunters were bringing for them. One child even ran up to the red-maned boar, saying that the animal looked tasty. Meanwhile, the adults were happy that they would finally be able to feed the children. Then the young shaman asked the girl if the food was shared among all the villagers. And then, because of this question, he remembered that he had not eaten anything for a whole day. Manhwa explained to the writer that, especially when it came to meat, most of it went to the totem warriors, and the leftovers were left for the children and reserve warriors. The guy asked what the old people eat, and then the heroine said that they get food rarely, and they usually eat wild fruits if they can find something. In addition, the tribe eats only half of the prey at once, and we dry the other half to feed ourselves while the hunters are away. The hero realized that food supplies were entirely dependent on a small group of hunters and gatherers, and that this was entirely dependent on luck. The young man asked Manhwa if her tribe was involved in farming, agriculture, or livestock breeding, since this could provide the village with food. The heroine didn't even understand the words that the writer said, and then added that they couldn't even feed themselves, let alone animals. The girl's statements baffled the new shaman because he did not know that everything was so bad in this settlement. Subai didn't know what to explain to the girl, that it was possible to raise pigs in order to eat them later, and most likely, the poor pig would be quietly slaughtered and eaten on the very first night. And then a man who looked like a lion appeared next to the new monk, and he asked Manhwa who this guy was, since they were seeing him for the first time. Then the man wanted to guess who it was, and for this purpose he even laid down his lute, intending to find out everything in detail. A hunter unknown to the writer asked if the guy was the heroine's future husband, whom her father had found for her. Then Manhwa began to scold the man, calling him Uncle Kangxi, shouting at him for saying such nonsense, and even asking every day when the heroine will finally get married. It was then that the hunters were told that this was the shaman's heir, which caused genuine surprise and delight among those who came, because they learned that the hope for the survival of the tribe was not yet lost. And one of the hunters noticed that the heir was somehow very thin, so it would be necessary to fatten him up, and therefore he was going to give the writer his entire catch. Everyone thought that their future depended only on him being the shaman's heir, so they tried in every way to make his life better. The hero asked Manhwa if all the guests in this settlement were treated as well as he was, And then the heroine asked why we treat strangers like that, but treat the young man like that only because he is a future shaman. Then a child started tugging at the young man's clothes, trying to attract attention to himself while holding a bird, which he looked at hungrily. It was clear that the child wanted to eat himself, but at the same time he told the writer that he wanted to share his food with him. And although Subai was touched by this, he understood that all this was being done only because he would soon become a shaman. When everyone had already left, closer to night, the guy stayed with Manhwa, and together they began to roast the prey over the fire. And then the girl asked why the writer did not accept the meat from that little boy, since by doing so the shaman would have honored the child. The guy explained that there was no honor in this, because they were all people, and then added that it was better to cook the meat well. And the young man said this because he saw how the heroine looked at the food with a hungry gaze, ready to pounce with the words that the prey was almost ready. Then the guy finally took the meat off the fire, because he realized that it was really ready to eat, so he didn't have to torment himself any longer. After this, the writer offered food to the heroine, because she still couldn't take her eyes off the cooked meat. However, the girl began to refuse, saying that she could not eat it because this meat was for the shaman, not for her, so only the shaman himself could eat it. But Manhwa was too hungry to resist for long, so she began to reach out for the food, saying that since Subai insisted, she couldn't refuse. And since the heroine has no choice, she will take the meat that the shaman offered her, but she will still have to eat it very quietly so that no one will find out. The young man couldn't stand it any longer and told the heroine to stop talking and take a bite. Manhwa repeated the guy's words that she should only bite off a piece, trying to restrain herself. It was obvious how hungry the heroine was, that when she opened her mouth, she even began to salivate profusely. The young man began to notice the state the girl was in at the moment. But the guy didn't have time to do anything, because Manhwa instantly approached him, shouting that she would only bite off a small piece. At that moment, the young shaman felt insignificant in front of the girl's hunger. It seemed as if a whole hurricane had hit the young man along with the heroine, almost knocking him down. Then Subai looked at the state of the meat after Manhwa took a small bite, and the writer was very surprised at what he saw. After all, the heroine not only bit off almost the entire piece, but also didn't leave even a bone, having bitten off that too. Although the meat was harder than on the youth's land, it was not by much. It was just a pity that there was no salt. When the heroine heard that the guy needed salt, she immediately started rummaging through her bag for some reason. Then the girl handed the boy something that was most likely salt, and the hero was not mistaken. There really was salt in the vessel, so he asked if it belonged to the heroine. Manhwa admitted that there was no salt left in the tribe, but she had simply saved up a little. The heroine explained that all totem warriors must eat salt, but since she is a reserve warrior, the young man does not have to worry about anything and eat calmly. It was then that the writer remembered that in the Stone Age, salt was very valuable. In his past life, he could easily buy a whole kilogram of salt in a store at a low price. After this, the shaman decided to refuse the offered salt, explaining that he thought about it and decided that he wanted to eat something simpler. But the girl still continued to insist that he not refuse, because she did not feel sorry for him. The heroine eventually took the salt back, saying that since the young man didn't want it, she would keep it for herself, while the writer thought that this salt was a treasure for Manhwa, so he couldn't just use it. Subai began to think that the village he had ended up in was probably considered poor, so he needed to figure out what to do to solve the most pressing problems as quickly as possible. In the end, the guy decided to stop at salt mining, so he asked the heroine where her tribe gets salt. Then the girl told that the hunters go to another tribe, because every 15 days the spotted deer tribe opens a market, and people from neighboring villages go there to buy something. Subai then asked when the market would open next, and Manhwa replied in 10 days. And while the guy was thinking about going to the market to learn more about this world, the heroine suddenly began to hide her face, as if trying to hide the fact that she was eating something. It turned out that the heroes were distracted from their dialogue by the girl's father, who came to them to tell the young man that the great shaman wanted to see him. Then the boy went to the hut where he was chosen as the new shaman. The chieftain did not tell the young man why he had been called, so he walked along in ignorance while the man looked at his back. The commander meanwhile told the others that the time would soon come for the great shaman to leave, and then everything would remain on Subai. And then the hunter answered him that he knew this, and that was why they were all gathered here now. It turned out that there were hunters near the hut, as if waiting for something. Everyone present had thoughtful faces, because everyone was thinking about what would happen to their tribe when the great shaman passed away. One of the hunters wore a hood, so it was impossible to see what kind of appearance this man had. And then, after the mysterious hunter took off his hood, it turned out that it was a beautiful girl. Everyone was wondering what kind of shaman Subai would be, because no one knew what kind of person he was. And then the hunters heard a cry that told the others to greet their new shaman, thus attracting the attention of all those present. When the writer came to the great shaman's home, he told the boy that the inheritance ceremony would take place tomorrow. And at that moment, the old man was about to tell the young man everything he needed to know. After all, the time has already come, and we can't delay any longer, because the time of the great shaman is running out. The old man then asked Subai if he knew what it meant to be a shaman, and the young man honestly admitted that he didn't really, so the writer needed an explanation. This is how the writer learned that a shaman is someone who protects a tribe, remembers its past and determines its future, and only by doing all this can one consider oneself a shaman. In their world, each tribe is based on the power of its totem. Each tribe has its own totems, and only a shaman can use their power, and only a shaman can awaken the blood marks of totem warriors. But since the young man has not been in this world for long, he does not know who the totem warriors are, so he asked the great shaman. It turned out that totem warriors are the strongest people in the tribe after the shaman. Each of the totem warriors has a lot of spiritual energy, and great power is hidden in the blood of each. But neither blood nor spiritual energy mean anything, because they cannot develop on their own. Without totem marks, the power hidden in the warrior's blood cannot be controlled, so it is very important for the tribe to have a shaman. In other words, only a shaman can unlock the potential of warriors and give them strength beyond human capabilities. There is power in everyone's blood, so with training and education, even the weakest of people can be made into a totem warrior. The difference between regular, reserve, and totem warriors is the power of their blood and spiritual energy. Having collected enough blood power, a person can go through a strengthening ritual conducted by a shaman. As a rule, reserve warriors are enough for battles with most animals. The tribe relies on them most of the time. But somewhere outside the villages there are animals whose strength is hard to even imagine, and only totem warriors can fight with such animals. Although there are few of them, but the tribe depends on them. And the strength of the tribe directly depends on the number of totem warriors. Thus, the writer understood how important the role of the shaman is, because as long as the tribe has a shaman, he can help people become totem warriors. And if we also take into account the dangerous times in which the tribe lives, then the value of a shaman increases many times over. Here the old man added that the shaman's value does not end there, because the hero will also be able to create shamanic amulets. After this, the shaman showed the young man a cloth in which various unknown objects were kept. There were also bundles containing all the methods of creating shamanic amulets known to the great shaman. When the boy took one of the packages and looked inside, he did not understand a single letter, because this language was unknown to him. The letters began to move and glow before the young man's eyes, so he definitely couldn't read it. The writer simply looked at these unfamiliar letters and immediately got a headache. It turned out that the young man could not yet read shamanic texts, but after the inheritance ceremony they would be revealed to him. After this, the old man showed the guy a shamanic amulet, on each of which a magic rune was drawn, and it could only be activated with the help of magic. The young man was very happy that the time for magic had come for him. Then the shaman decided to tell more about magic, and began by saying that magic comes in different forms. With the help of magic, you can create poisons that allow you to poison someone, and there is also magic that allows you to heal others. There are also blessing techniques that make people stronger and faster and so on. The hero liked to hear about this, so he asked the shaman what of this he could do. Then the great shaman replied that he was good at healing and could cast blessings. At least that's what everyone thought. The young man realized that he shouldn't talk about the shaman's abilities in order to avoid an attack. The great shaman was pleased that the one who noticed him was a smart guy, because he understood everything quickly. Shamans are highly valued by everyone, but they are an easy target for opponents, because without a shaman, the tribe will not survive. Then the old man showed a scroll that contained ingredients for creating amulets, and places where they could be found, so the young man should remember all of this, and keep it a secret, because it was their heritage. The guy promised that he would carve this knowledge on his heart to remember and never forget, because it is very important. And then the great shaman began to cough heavily, and then the young man saw blood, guessing that the man was ill. The writer, without wasting a second, immediately jumped up to help the old man, telling him not to move while the young man treated him. After this, the young man used his healing ability. However, the treatment was ineffective, because the mastery of the ability was not improved. Then the great shaman told the boy not to waste his strength, because there was no way to help the old man. Subai, meanwhile, did not understand why his treatment was not enough to help the great shaman. The man told the young man that he was very sorry that he would not see the miracles that the young man would create in the future, and then asked him to help him up so that the shaman could tell the writer something else. the great shaman told the young man not to forget the knowledge that the old man had passed on to him, and to always remember why he needed it. Then Subai promised that he would never forget all this knowledge and would protect it, so the shaman could not worry about it. And since the great shaman has already told the writer all the information that he must know, then the inheritance ceremony can soon begin, because the guy is already ready. After this, the heroes left the dwelling of the great shaman and went to the ceremony, where the whole tribe was already waiting for them. The old man told Subai to kneel down, thus beginning the succession ceremony. Everyone watched this without saying a word and even barely breathing, afraid to miss even a second of such a significant event. The great shaman began his speech by saying that he had lived a long life of 63 years, so it was time to pass on the tribe to a new shaman. And since everyone is ready, we can begin the inheritance ceremony. Everyone started shouting excitedly, waiting for what would happen next, because everyone wanted to see everything with their own eyes. After this, the great shaman shouted that blood must be shed. The others picked up these words and shouted them, following the great shaman. After these words, everyone raised their knives and cut themselves on the inside of their palms, and the blood that came out of people after the cut began not to drip down, but to fly in one direction, which looked magical. The great shaman collected this blood with his magic, holding it in front of him until it accumulated, and then the old man shouted that the totem had appeared, while looking at the blood in front of him. It turned out that from all the collected blood, something resembling a tribal totem actually began to appear, and then this totem began to move, heading towards the guy, who was very surprised by this action, and even a little scared. After this, the power of the totem seemed to enter Subai, who immediately felt it. The great shaman placed his hand on his forehead, and told the young man that he was now the shaman's true heir. It turned out that the shaman put his hand to his forehead in order to take knowledge from himself and pass it on to the new shaman, saying that there was the whole truth about the history of the shaman and all the riches of the totem. After these words, the great shaman put his hand to the boy's forehead to convey all this knowledge to him. And then the young man found himself in a place where, it seemed, he had already been. And then he remembered that he had been there the first time he met the great shaman. And then a desert appeared before their eyes, through which several people were walking, who were talking about how they needed to walk faster in order to last a couple more days, and then they would have to get to the lands of their ancestors. And one of them said that he was very hungry, because he had not had a crumb in his mouth for 2 days. Among these people was a little boy, who looked like he was also very tired and wanted to eat. At night, when this boy was left alone, he knelt down and began to pray to the totem god. He asked God to allow the child to see the future of his tribe. After this, other people saw that something began to happen to the boy who had moved away from them, and then a girl ran up to him, asking how much of the poison of Providence he had drunk, and then added that he seemed to be crazy to do this to himself. It turned out that the girl was a shaman, and she realized that the child had done something that should not be done, so he would not live long. And then someone added that this was a disaster, because they had lost a potential heir to the shaman. And then the guy turned to the girl, saying that he saw something. And then the shaman told the boy that he had to be quieter, because it was a secret, because one could not rely on predictions. One had only to remember them. The boy asked his mother if she thought that the day would come when their tribe would become stronger, to which she replied that she did not know. After all, it has not yet been determined whether the tribe will be strong or not, because all this will be in the future, so it is impossible to say for sure now. Then the girl added that she believed that the boy would give people food and shelter. These words made the boy smile, because it was nice that his mother believed in him so much. After this, the child closed his eyes and found himself in an unknown space, in which a door suddenly opened and some silhouette appeared. The boy survived, and as he grew up, he heard words about how he was too self-confident a shaman, because he was too weak, but he believed to the end that he would do what he wanted. Once in the tribe there was a case when the shaman managed to injure dangerous animals, but did not have time to protect his child, who began to apologize to the shaman for not living up to expectations, so it is not worth wasting energy on his treatment. In the eyes of the great shaman, one could see how much he had experienced, and what a difficult path he had had. All his life, the shaman thought that he could not give up, but had to protect his tribe until the end. And so the writer was able to follow the entire life of the great shaman, right up to the moment when the old man met him. It was obvious that this story touched the young man very much, because tears were rolling down his cheeks. And then he noticed that he had made the shaman wait for a very long time. Then the great shaman began to calm Subai, saying that there was no need to cry, because all this had long since passed. The old man believes that he is not so important that he should shed tears over him, because the most important thing is only inheritance. While the shaman spoke, he drew lines on the young man, the meaning of which was known only to him. The shaman's hand suddenly released the young man's face, causing Subai to pay attention to it. It turned out that the great shaman fell as soon as he drew the symbols on the writer's face, and the boy then grabbed the old man's hand, saying goodbye to him. The last thing the great shaman managed to say was that he was leaving everything to the young man, and then with a calm heart, he went into well-deserved rest. And so the inheritance ceremony ended, and after some time the guy opens his eyes, as if after a long sleep. It turned out that Subai was not sleeping, but had lost consciousness, so he was taken to the place where he is now. The young man thought that now he understood how the shamanic totem works, because it is something like a shamanic chronicle, in which each shaman leaves his mark, and the main secret of the ceremony is the inheritance of the drawing. Now that the writer has become a full-fledged heir, his eyesight has improved, and he began to see everything clearly, although he was previously nearsighted, and it seems that the guy's body has become stronger. Then the young man decided to test his guesses by ordering the system to open the status window, where he had added a mana reserve, the Yanlong totem, and in the work it was added that he was now not just a writer, but also a shaman. Then Subai saw a note in which it was written that with the help of the ability you can heal other people, which will improve the skills of the owner, and this will help the guy become a shaman with great power. But do not forget about the original tasks. The young man was pleased that his endurance, strength, and speed had increased more than twofold, and his spiritual strength had increased tenfold, and since so much had changed, the young man began to feel different. When Subai saw that the system said that his spiritual powers and mana reserves were equal, he realized that they were proportional, which meant that the mana reserves were obtained from spiritual powers, but the abilities obtained through the system were directly based on spiritual powers. This was all the guy wanted to know. So after that, he received his prize. The writer received all the previously unclaimed support kits, including a beginner's kit that included the linen fabric recipe. The young man realized that these sets could contain literally anything, so he wouldn't even be surprised if one day he received a pack of toilet paper. But linen fabric is a useful thing, because most people wear skins, and with the help of this knowledge, he will be able to create at least some clothes. And then someone from the street called the writer, first addressing him as Subai, and then correcting himself and calling him a shaman, asking if he was awake, to which the guy replied that he was. It was the chief who first apologized to the young man for disturbing him so early in the morning, and then said that it was time for the young man to move to the main hut. Then the young man asked if the main hut was the one where the shaman lived. At this point, the commander reminded them that Subai was now their shaman, so the tribe needed his orders. And then the young man realized that he had absolutely no idea what was wrong with the old shaman's body. So he asked the chief. Another man appeared at the entrance and explained that they had followed the advice of the old shaman and therefore burned his body. And then the man held out his hand, which contained what was left of the old shaman. Then the boy asked if it was relics, and then he thought that from a scientific point of view it was just a stone. But he didn't know how different this world was from his previous one. But from the men's reaction, it was clear that they were apparently hearing about relics for the first time. So they did not understand the young man and what he was asking about. Subai explained that there is a legend that a person who has lived his life with dignity and nobility leaves behind relics after cremation. So the young man promised to preserve them, so that after the return of the ancestral lands, they would build a temple where these relics would be left. And this was just the beginning of plans for the tribe, because now they have a new shaman who is going to make people's lives better with his knowledge. The boy decided to get to work right away because he knew every second was important, so he asked the men how things were going in the tribe and how much meat they had in stock. It turned out that the tribe doesn't have much food, because it's barely enough for the totem warriors, but the main problem is feeding the 6 spare warriors. The young shaman was surprised by the news that there were only 6 spare warriors in their tribe. The chief then explained that there had been more of them before, 26, but most had fallen into the hands of the Black Snake tribe's totem warriors when they tried to escape. So now they were either dead or in slavery. The young man asked how far away the Black Snake tribe was from them, because he needed to find out how serious a threat they posed. But Subai has no reason to worry about this, because the Black Snake tribe will definitely not get them, because the lands in which they now live are deserted and barren, and their opponents do not like this. And there are almost no animals near the village, so hunting is very difficult, because it takes hunters a day to get to the place, and then another 3 for the hunt itself. Of course, this is bad, but there are also advantages, because although it is difficult to get food here, this also makes them not the most priority target, which gives time for development. Then the young man realized that they could not rely on hunting alone, so they needed to think of something to sell at the market instead of food. And then the guy remembered that he had knowledge about flax, so he asked the men if they had ever heard of it. The hunters replied that of course they had heard about flax, which they considered something rare, since only large tribes made it. And one of the hunters admitted that since childhood, he had dreamed of getting linen clothes and leaving them to his children. They wanted to get more linen clothing, but after the migration they have very little dried meat, and so every time flax appears in the market of the spotted leopard tribe, it is immediately swept away, and for a roll of flax they ask 3 pieces of dried meat. Then the shaman asked how much one piece weighed, because in his past world in ancient times they calculated about 55 kilograms of meat. Then the chief said that he would think about it, and then asked Sangshi not to move. The commander showed on the hunter how much is approximately considered 1 piece for them. After this, the young shaman asked how much flax was in 1 roll, and then the commander asked Sanshi to lie down. Thus the chief showed what the writer asked, explaining that 1 roll is as big as from the door to the hunter. The young man calculated that for a meter of flax he would have to pay about 136 kilograms of dried meat, which was very expensive. And then Subai decided to start small, namely, to first get more meat so that the tribe would forget about hunger. But instead of hunting, people somehow ended up in a field where there was most likely no chance of catching any large animal. And then one of the hunters asked their leader Sanshi why they didn't hunt, but collected grass, because it was a waste of time. The leader, without thinking twice, ordered the curious hunter to remain silent, because the future of their tribe depended on it. And all because the young shaman had previously told the others that he knew how to make fabric from flax, which delighted everyone. To the enthusiastic shouts, the guy replied that everyone should keep their voices down and their heads down, because if anyone found out about this, their tribe would be in trouble. After this, Subai asked the leader of the hunters that the next time he went hunting, he should look for the plant, because it is from this plant that cloth is made, so it is up to the man whether their tribe will have enough food. Sanshi approached the work he received responsibly, because he did not expect that the shaman would entrust him with something so important. Meanwhile, the writer was thinking that the tribe's stock of dried meat would last for 2 weeks, and the hunters would spend 3 days traveling there, 3 days hunting, and then 3 more days traveling back. So there would be only 5 days left to make the cloth. The young man was very worried, because there was little time, and Kangxi and Yanjiao might not find the materials, and even if they succeeded, the young man did not know what to do next, wondering whether he should tell everyone how to make linen fabric. The writer decided not to show himself unnecessarily. Therefore, he personally definitely cannot do this. So he needs a suitable assistant, whom he himself will teach everything, and he, in turn, will teach the others. But the chance that things will go badly cannot be ignored either. So the shaman also needs to come up with a plan B. And he should not forget that the tribe has a lot of other problems, including a lack of drinking water, salt, and sanitation. There were too many troubles to solve, so just thinking about it all gave the young man a headache. The guy began to think that he was just a writer and couldn't take care of himself, so he wasn't sure that he could handle an entire tribe. And then a guest entered the shaman's dwelling and asked the guy what was happening to him. The girl saw that the young man was holding his head, so she began to worry about him, asking if he was sick. Then the heroine came close to the shaman, touching his forehead and asking if the guy was hot, and if it was hot inside his head. The writer suddenly recoiled and asked the girl what she was doing, and also why she was near his hut, since she could have been eavesdropping. At that very moment, the heroine explained that she was not eavesdropping, but simply listening to the young man's conversations with herself, and did not even try to hide, and then added that her father and the others had gone hunting, so she was doing her best to protect their shaman. After this, the young man asked if the girl could be trusted, because he was not so sure about it. The heroine replied that it didn't matter, because the main thing was that she was certainly more reliable than the shaman who sat and held his head. And besides, among the reserve warriors, she was the strongest. The young man tried to calm the girl down by telling her that he had no time to fight with her, so he might be offended. Then, as soon as the girl let him go, the guy asked her if shamans always solve all this pile of problems on their own. The heroine answered that of course not, because shamans have assistants. So the young man asked where the assistants of the previous shaman were, and whether they wanted to help him. It turned out that during the attack of the Black Snake tribe, the assistants were protecting the shaman, and thus, every single one of them died. Subai realized that the Black Snake tribe was trying to destroy the foundation on which the Yanlong tribe stood. If the old shaman's assistants are no longer there, then new ones need to be found. And then the young man asked the heroine if she had anyone in mind. The requirements for a shaman's assistant included that he had to be smart in order to help the young man solve problems. Also, the shaman's assistant must be diligent and have a fresh and healthy outlook on things. And then the girl said that Subai had literally described her. So the guy could have just said that he wanted to see her in the assistant's place, and there was no need to come up with a riddle. But the writer let the heroine down by telling her that she didn't fit any of the criteria, so she could calm down. The girl pouted at the young man's words, and then told him that in that case he would be better off choosing Miko for himself. Then the shaman asked what it was. Yanhua explained that this is a woman who helps the shaman with the housework, cleans the house, looks after the hearth and all that. So, Miko is the one who takes care of the daily affairs instead of the shaman, and this is exactly what the young man was looking for, so he asked someone to advise him. It turned out that there was one girl who was suitable for this role. So Subai asked to be taken to her to quickly see the one who could become Miko for him. And then Yanhua remembered how her father told her that sooner or later the shaman would look for Miko, and since she had been with him recently, the leader believed that she would be ideal for this role. It was clear that the girl did not want to agree to this, but her father continued to insist that this was a great honor, so the heroine should not miss such an opportunity. Yanhua knew that every girl dreamed of becoming a Miko, but the problem was that her plans were only to take revenge on those who harmed her tribe, because no matter what, she was going to become a totem warrior and kill the bastards from the Black Snake tribe. And while the heroine was replaying this memory in her head, the young man tried to shout to her, but she did not react in any way. The shaman asked the girl if they were going in the right direction and how long it would be until they reached their destination. And then Yanhua said that they had already arrived, and then pointed her hand in the direction of someone's hut. The heroine said that her friend lived there, so she could invite her, but the writer stopped her, saying that first he wanted to take a look at her himself, and then asked whether the applicant lived alone. And while the young man was trying to take a look, Yanhua told him that several girls lived here together and worked here. The young shaman nevertheless looked inside the dwelling, trying to find Yanhui's friend with his eyes. And the guy still managed to find the one who was offered to him as Miko. The heroes began to watch the girl together, discussing her, and then Yanhua asked how she was with the shaman. The guy replied that the girl was very beautiful, but looked so fragile that her tribal marks on her face were barely visible. Then the heroine explained that her friend was weak, but very kind and diligent, just a little stubborn sometimes. It turned out that Yu Ying was Kanshi's niece, and her parents died when she was very young, so she was raised by her aunt. But recently her aunt became pregnant, so Yu Ying moved to this place, saying that she would not take a crumb from them anymore, because they needed her more. The guy noticed that the girl had done the right thing, but Yanhua didn't agree with him, because there was always meat in Uncle Kangshi's house, and in this place, at best, she would get roots. And then Subai explained that there is a big difference between receiving and giving, so he understands the girl and her actions. The hero remembered his childhood, and then decided that Yu Yin just wanted to put his thoughts in order. But Yanhua's opinion was shared by other girls, telling Yu Ying that she should return to Uncle Kangxi, because she wouldn't find anything good there, and they also had a new shaman. And the heroine's parents used to be totem warriors, so she would definitely be able to serve the shaman. But Yu Yin just waved it off, saying that their revered shaman would definitely not like her, so she wouldn't be able to become a Miko. However, others continued to egg her on, saying that if she missed this opportunity now, she would regret it for the rest of her life. And then the girl agreed that maybe she would like to be Miko a little, but she was too unsure of herself. And then the heroine added that, in her opinion, Yanhua is more suitable for this place, because when they were children, she constantly said that she wanted to become a Miko. The young shaman heard the girl's words, so he turned towards Yanhua with a silent question, and then guessed that both friends wanted to be Miko. And then Yanhua couldn't stand it any longer and burst into her friend's room, shouting that Yu Ying shouldn't tell such things to everyone. To which Kanshi's niece replied that her friend herself had previously told this to everyone she met, so it was not a big secret. And then the girl also noted that Yanhua had been eavesdropping. Then the young shaman stood up for the girl, explaining that they were not eavesdropping, but observing, because the boy asked Yanhua to bring him here. Yu Yin started to get nervous, because she realized that the shaman heard every word she said, and how presumptuous it was to say that she wanted to become a Miko, because she was completely useless. So the girl was already thinking about how she would leave here and find a place where no one knew her. And then the writer told the girl that he wanted to ask her something, realizing that the assistant should have at least basic knowledge. So the young man asked Yu Ying if she could write, confident that humans had already reached that level of development. But this question surprised everyone present, who began to ask the shaman if he could write, which was surprising. Then the girl apologized and replied that, unfortunately, she couldn't write at all. The young man asked Yanhua if this was some kind of wrong question, and then she explained that only large tribes have their own written language, and their tribe was not one of them. In that case, Subai immediately got down to business, asking Yu Yin if she was ready to become a Miko, since her friend had praised her very much, and the guy decided to avoid the rest of the questions, since he had no idea at all what level of development the tribe had. Yanhua added that her goal was to avenge their ancestors and become a totem warrior. So the girl thought for a long time, and realized that her friend was more suitable for this role than anyone else. Besides, Yu Ying herself had wanted to become a Miko all her life. But the girl continued to doubt, so the shaman tried to reassure her that she did not need to worry about what others would think. And then Yu Ying explained that the thing was that she was shy, stupid, and often made mistakes. The writer stopped persuading the girl and began to get up, getting ready to leave. Since Yu Yin didn't want to, the guy decided not to force her, because the final decision was hers alone. And although the girl tried to stop Subai, he never returned, telling Yanhua that it was time for them to go. Yanhua followed the young shaman, asking him why he ran away so easily and quickly. Yu Ying is very shy and fragile, so it was unclear why the guy treated her so cruelly. Because if he left her like that now, she would hate herself and think that she was useless. Then the young man asked the heroine why she decided that he had abandoned her friend. After all, a person must seize opportunities themselves, and they cannot be forced. So if she wants to become Miko, she must overcome her weaknesses and grab the bull by the horns. Subai explained that the girl herself would be better off if she achieved what she wanted herself. And then the heroes saw some silhouette running after them, waving his hand to attract attention. Yanhua began to hope that her friend had gathered her strength and decided to catch up with the shaman. However, when the man approached, it became clear that it was not Yu Yin, but another girl who had come running to pay her respects to the shaman by giving him something. The writer then felt that he had expected too much from the girl, so he told Yanhua that it was time for them to move on. But at that moment, the girl who came running asked the shaman to wait, because Yu Yin also ran with her. It's just that the girl is very weak and runs slowly. After these words, everyone saw another silhouette approaching them, although not very quickly. And this time, Yu Yin herself was running, and it was clear that running had left her very tired. As soon as the girl ran up and caught her breath, she confidently shouted to the young shaman that she wanted to become Miko. Although the girl looked confident when she confessed, after that she still showed her fragility and started crying, and her friend began to calm her down while Subai smiled in the background. Yanhui told Yu Ying to stop crying, because the shaman had already decided that she would be a Miko, so there was no point in shedding tears. And then the new Miko explained that these were tears of happiness, because she had never even dared to dream of such a thing, and therefore she was now very happy. However, Yanhua was worried that the test for Miko was too simple, so she didn't know if everything would be okay. And then the guy explained that he couldn't give the girl an obstacle course with riddles to check if she could become Miko, because he already saw that she was suitable for the role of the shaman's assistant. After this, the friend began to laugh at Yu Ying because when she cried, she looked like a cat, and this made her very happy. The young shaman understood that with two friends he would have problems, but then he thought that at least they were both beautiful. When the young Miko calmed down, the young man told her to wash her face before starting work, to which the girl replied that they had very little water, so she could not waste it on something like that. The guy noticed how much the offer to wash his face surprised the girls, who were not used to washing their faces so easily. And this in turn amazed the young man, who forgot how bad the hygiene was in the tribe. And then the young shaman asked his friends how many of them in this tribe wash themselves. Yanhua said that they rinse often. For example, she does it once a year, during the rainy season. Although the shaman knew that they washed rarely, he did not think that it was that much. Subai wondered to himself what kind of creature had been with him since he came into this world. And then he thought that the others in the tribe had a better sense of smell than he did. So they probably just got used to the smell so it wouldn't bother them. After this, young Miko asked the young man if it really mattered how often they washed. Of course, this is important. So something needs to be done about the local unsanitary conditions, which means they need a stable source of water, and in the future, they will need water for irrigation. Subai asked the girls where the tribe usually got water, and they told him that to the southeast of the village there is a small lake, but there are many very strong animals around it, so only totem warriors go there, who collect water and carry it, so the tribe only has enough to quench their thirst. Then the guy asked to show him the way, because water is the source of life, so we need to deal with the problem of its absence. And at that moment the heroines grabbed the shaman, detaining him, and then explained that he could not leave the village, because it was too dangerous outside. While the young man was trying to prove to the girls that there was nothing dangerous there, he was already thinking at that moment that he had been put under house arrest. It turns out that some totem warriors are expelled from their tribes, so they wander the wastelands until they come across some small tribes, and then they find shamans and force them to perform the inheritance ritual. And this even happened to the shaman of one tribe, because when he was found, he was completely exhausted and eventually died. The young man learned that because of this, the shaman was strictly forbidden to leave the tribe unless the situation was out of the ordinary. And then Subai remembered the old shaman's words that this work was dangerous and difficult. Manhwa added that it was dangerous for the guy outside. But in the village he was not in any danger because the totem warriors were divided into two groups, so an ordinary exile could not get close to the village. First, the shaman reminded himself that there were 11 totem warriors in the tribe, 6 of whom hunted, and the other 5 guarded the village. And then the young man thought that continuing to get water in this way was a waste of time and effort. So first he needed to somehow solve the water problem. And so Subai began to resist, shouting at the girls to let him go because they needed to find water. And since they were so worried, the chief could go with the guy. But it turned out that the leader still hadn't returned, and going out to look for him was no less dangerous, especially since before leaving, Manhwa's father instructed him not to let the shaman out. But the guy kept insisting that water was very important, because their lives directly depended on it, so the heroines gave in. So the heroes all went together to look for water, and Manhwa said that she would protect the shaman at the cost of her life. And then the young Miko added that if a wild beast appeared, then let the others run away while it ate her. And then her friend reminded Yu Ying that they were close to the tribe, so the hunters had to deal with the animals. All this time, a mysterious silhouette followed the unsuspecting heroes. The shaman was currently worried that they might get lost and step into a dangerous area. Meanwhile, Manhwa continued to promise that the hunters should be nearby at this time, and they are not just patrolling and transporting water, but also spending a lot of time hunting. And then the heroes noticed a figure in the distance that began to move towards them at great speed. They tried to figure out who it was, but the silhouette did not answer their questions about who he was. A shadow passed over the head of the young shaman, who immediately thought that it was the exiled one. And then it turned out that there was not one person walking next to them, but 2, whom the heroes were able to see at the moment when the silhouette stopped. It was then that Manhwa recognized the strangers as Aunt Hong and Black Fang, and at that moment the shaman managed to discern the power of the totem warriors. As soon as Sister Hong released Black Fang, he asked the boys why they were outside the village, and then added that they should quickly return back. The young shaman explained that he did not want to return home because he wanted to see the source of water, and then asked the man why he was alone on the road leading to the village. Black Fang then replied that Mai was injured and needed help immediately, or he would die. Then Subai ordered that he be quickly taken to the one who needed his urgent help. Meanwhile, the chief told Maiman to hold on, because Black Fang had already run for the amulets, so he needed help. The wounded man replied that he would not last that long, so the others had better leave him, because very soon the animals would come running to him, smelling his blood, and then asked the Flaming Horn to give his share of the meat to his son Mai Mao, who would definitely become a totem warrior. And then the leader noticed that since Maiman had enough strength to talk, he would definitely hold out. At that moment, the men, waiting for help, heard some rustling in the bushes, so the hunters rushed to defend themselves, but it turned out that they had attacked Black Fang. Shakun ran out of the trees after him and was able to repel the hunters' attack. When the chief saw everyone who came after Black Fang, he was very surprised. And after that, the commander began to scold the hunter for asking him to bring shamanic amulets, and not the shaman himself, because these places are too dangerous. And then Subai explained that he himself wanted to come to this place, because he knows how to help. And after that, the guy noticed that the wound was very serious, and ordinary people would not have been able to withstand this. After this, the chief ordered the others not to interfere while the young shaman tried to save the hunter. The girls, meanwhile, were surprised by the young man's confidence, because they knew that it took at least 30 days to learn magic, and he also cast spells without words, which they saw for the first time. Then the commander thought that the old shaman was right, because Subai was very talented. The young shaman, meanwhile, was thinking that his healing power was working, but the recovery speed was poor, which meant that the first level of healing was clearly not enough, so he decided to use it several times. The injured hunter was shocked to find that there was no trace left of his large wound. The others decided that the wounded man was very weak and therefore needed to be taken to the village, but he himself said that he was still able to fight. Then the shaman told Maiman to watch his beak, because while he was here, the others would not be able to protect the shaman. Meanwhile, the heroines surrounded the writer. asking him how he felt, to which he replied that he was just a little tired. But in fact, after 3 treatments, he felt as if his soul was about to leave his body. After that, the guy saw that in the system his healing skills had increased by 9 points. And then he asked the system how he could restore his strength, and they advised him to rest or take some medications. And then Subai asked the leader how Mai got injured, because he flies so high and powerfully, and he is also very powerful. It turned out that while patrolling, he was attacked by several dead forest wolves, and these are hybrid animals, so although their bodies are not particularly strong, they can shoot bone darts, which are difficult to defend against. Manhwa pointed out to the boy that even one of the strongest junior totem warriors was in danger, while Subai himself believed that he was not, which was a mistaken opinion. The young man was not accustomed to the fact that in this world there were not only ordinary wild animals, but also great beasts that only strong totem warriors could fight. Each great beast is special, and they are divided into 3 categories, which include mixed beasts, primordial beasts, and ancient beasts. Totem warriors also come in 3 levels, and in their tribe, Yanjiao, Kangxi, Maiman, Shahun, and Qinyan have reached the pinnacle of the lower level. Upon reaching the peak, the junior totem warrior becomes a middle totem warrior. The boy understood how his power was developing, but he did not understand what the difference in power was between totem warriors of different levels. It was clear how big the difference was between a junior totem warrior and an ordinary soldier. And while Subai was pondering the new information, the chief ordered Shakun and Black Fang to help him escort the shaman to the village. And then the young man said that he would not leave until he saw the source, because he had to find out more information about it for the sake of the tribe. To which the commander replied that it was very dangerous, because there were too many animals and too few of them, so they would not be able to protect Subai. But the writer did not give up, saying that the water problem needed to be urgently resolved. The shaman explained that his safety was not as important as the lives of those living in the Yanlong tribe. When the leader saw how much the boy wanted to help the others, he agreed to his request. And then the commander shouted that if anything happened, they would have to protect Subai at any cost. It turned out that it was not so easy to get to the source, so even though the young man's strength was twice as strong as a human's, he was already tired. The story repeated itself with how the writer's ascent up the mountain was ridiculed by the younger students. Because again, almost no one looked tired. But the boy wasn't the only one who lost all his strength, because his Miko also had trouble climbing up. But it turned out that the girl was carrying fruits that she found along the way, and decided to collect them. So Subai looked the weakest in any case. And then the leader ordered everyone to stop, because they had finally reached the right place. Having reached the reservoir, the heroes saw timber wolves, which made the shaman's knees shake because of their eerie appearance. And then the chief said that while the timber wolves could still be dealt with, the stone crocodiles living in the lake were a real problem. The stone crocodiles turned out to be the original beasts, so they became the masters of the lake, because there are more than 10 of them there. Crocodiles cannot be defeated, so people simply collect water at the times when the crocodiles crawl out onto land to sleep. And then the shaman said that it was too dangerous, so we had to outplay the animal mind. After this, the shaman added that finding a solution is not so difficult, because they will dig. The guy noted that this lake is a natural pool that can hold water, and it is fed by groundwater and surface runoff. And if they can make a canal somewhere in the lowlands, near the lake, then they will be able to provide the village with water, and people will no longer have to worry. Then, one of the friends said that she didn't understand anything, and the second explained to her that they would have to dig a ditch. Black Fang stepped forward and said he was ready to dig if necessary. The shaman asked the man if he was feeling well, since he had recently been attacked, and Black Fang replied that everything was fine, although his head was spinning. Remembering the attack on Black Fang, Subai asked the chieftain why they attacked by sound without thinking, because that way they could kill one of their own. The captain explained that they had something to fear, because in the wildlands they were no different from animals, because they were either hunters or food. Especially at night, when animals have a better sense of direction. Attacking first is an instinct that gives people a better chance of survival, and warriors often fight each other, so it is better to get a couple of wounds in a training fight than to die because of a beast. In addition, there are much fewer of them than before, so hunters should be more careful. The writer apologized to the leader, saying that he was wrong, because he did not know such information before, but the man opened his eyes. While the others were chatting, White Fang had already started digging, shouting for everyone to watch as he could. The shaman tried to calm the hunter down, telling him that the guy hadn't even said where they would dig yet, because first they had to go down to the lowland. Each took on a specific role. For example, Yu Ying would help Black Fang dig in the right direction, and Manhwa would help the shaman get rid of the grass, While Yanhua was doing her part, Subai suddenly froze in place. It turned out that the writer thought that a trained warrior could be seen right away, because the girl had very pumped-up buttocks. Miko reported to the boy that the ground in the place where Black Fang was digging had become wet, which meant that he was approaching a source of water. The young man began to think that things were going too well, as if he had forgotten something. And then everyone heard some noise, so they immediately ran to understand what had happened. It turned out that the noise was made by a bear, which did not look normal, because it was too strong. The shaman asked why the animals started fighting, and then they explained to him that if someone used the source for their own purposes, and the other animals did not allow this, then a fight would begin. And crocodiles with stone armor do not participate. They will hunt better if the losing side is wounded. Then the young man began to think that if the canal were dug up, it would soon be occupied by wild animals, while the water would contain not only their saliva, but also feces. Therefore, Subai stopped all work, explaining that the ditch would be more useful to animals than to people. Afterwards, the young man added that they would not abandon the idea, and then asked if there was bamboo nearby, because they would need it. When the others didn't understand what bamboo was, I had to explain that it was a plant that was hard on the outside and hollow on the inside. Yanhua said that they don't have bamboo, but there are 3 plants that fit the description, including the hollow tree, red bone tree, and heartless grass, and in their area, only the hollow tree can be found. When the shaman was asked why he needed this tree, he replied that it would be of immeasurable benefit, but that it would require little effort. After all, they will need wood to make a primitive water supply system. So the heroes set out to get trees that would help them a lot. While the chieftain was breaking down trees with his own efforts, the shaman was waiting nearby for the work to be completed. After this, the young man approached the tree to examine it, and saw that the epidermis was very dense, and the thickness and tensile strength were remarkable. The guy explained that this tree was a real pipe made for them by nature. Then the chief admitted that he still did not understand what the shaman was going to do with this log. And then a girl called the heroes, saying that Black Fang had found water. Subai told the chief to take the log and bring it to the others, and the writer would explain the plan later. When everyone gathered together again, they saw that Black Fang had actually managed to dig a moat with water. The young man was happy that groundwater had been found, and thought to himself that this was the first time he had done this, since he had only seen this in movies before. The heroes could not believe that they had actually managed to dig up water, and the young man was thinking that if they tried to build an aqueduct, the animals would break it immediately, so he decided that they needed to make a reservoir. Yanhua shouted that if water could simply be dug up, then it could be done right in the village, to which her friend replied that if it worked like that, then the shaman would have immediately ordered it to be done in the village. Subai explained that water is not available everywhere, and the village is not in the best location, since there are no trees nearby, which means there is no water either. The leader continued to ask why they needed the tree, because he didn't understand at all, and then the guy explained that they would use the tree to pump out water. If water gradually collects in the tank, it will overflow and the water will begin to spread. But if they dig a hollow tree into the tank, the water will flow through its empty core. So the shaman wants to dig in a lot of logs until the water reaches the village, and that way they will have water. Hearing this, the heroes began to praise the young man for coming up with such good ideas. Yu Ying still didn't understand how the water stayed in the reservoir and didn't go into the ground. The writer explained everything by the fact that the hydrostatic pressure in the lake is high, but in the pit it is low, so little water seeps into the ground. And then the young man thought that the things he had learned for the sake of his books had come in handy in his life. When the young man looked at the girls, he noticed that they did not understand a word of what he was saying, so he could stop there. And since there were no more questions, it was time for the team to get to work. Subai ordered the others to gather some branches and grass, as they needed to cover the reservoir from the beasts. And after that, Yanhua and Black Fang would have to stay by the reservoir to keep an eye on the water. And the boy asked the chieftain to take him to the village, because the young man also had orders for the rest of the residents. In the village, a young shaman announced to everyone that if they tried, then in the coming days they would solve the water problem. The writer began to give orders, saying that the work of the totem warriors would be taken over by the reserves, and Maimon would remain in charge. Shahut and the other totem warriors will guard the road to the lake at this time, and the rest will have to drive away all the animals so that they do not interfere with the work. Firehorn will be responsible for the supply of trees, and Singing Frog will connect them, and the route must go downhill so that the water flows into the village. Then they asked the shaman how to connect the trees, because they don't stick together and the water flows out. Subai drew the shape of the logs so that they would fit together. This made me admire the shaman again, who comes up with such unusual solutions. Thus passed 2 days of hard work, in which all the inhabitants of the village took part. And the people's work was not in vain, because water finally flowed from their homemade pipe. Everyone was happy, because thanks to the shaman, the village now had water. The screams of the people were heard by young Miko, who was with Subai at the time. She told the young man that the villagers were very grateful to him, because he had helped them a lot, to which the guy replied that the residents themselves were great, because they worked so hard that they finished everything faster than he thought. Then the young man told Yu Ying that he wanted a new rule to be introduced into the tribe, and then the girl asked what it was. At that moment, the young shaman smiled mysteriously, as if he knew what effect this rule would have. The boy told his Miko that they would have to drink a lot of hot water. After this, an order was announced throughout the village that residents would have to boil water before drinking it. But people didn't understand why they should do this, because it's difficult and time-consuming, and there's no point in it. Yu Ying then explained to everyone that there were invisible small bugs in the water, so they needed to boil the water to kill them. However, many still thought that this was complete nonsense, because if a shaman sees something that others do not see, it means that he simply sees ghosts. Even the shaman said that there was nothing in the beetles, because during times of famine they ate them on purpose, and nothing terrible happened. And then Miko continued to try to convince the others, talking about some person who had been vomiting and had a fever for a whole week because of these bugs in the water. But everyone continued to question the girl, saying that she believed in some nonsense, and then she realized that she was weak for such arguments. And then the heroine remembered that she was Miko, so she needed to be strong so that the shaman would not be disappointed in her. And then she told the others not to make noise, and to listen here. Then Yu Yin added that the shaman himself told her that people might not understand this, but he did not wish them harm, so anyone who disobeyed the order would take care of themselves, and the shaman would not be to blame for this. These words were able to convince the residents, because they began to remember cases where people actually died from diarrhea, which could have been caused by dirty water. Subai himself was pleased that the popularization of boiled water was in full swing. The guy asked the heroine whether she had told people that they would have to wait until the water cooled down and not drink boiling water, and she answered yes. The young man thought that since he did not know how to increase the population, he would focus on reducing mortality, and then he would need to provide everyone with food and sanitary conditions. And then the young man finally noticed that Yu Yin was doing something incomprehensible to him in his home. So Subai asked his Miko what she was doing, to which the girl replied that she was laying straw, because she needed somewhere to sleep. It was unexpected that the heroine, it turns out, was making herself a sleeping place. Yu Yin explained to the young man that Miko should live with the shaman, and then thought that Subai did not want this, since he was asking. The guy replied that it wasn't that he was against it, he was just worried about one thing, which he started to talk about, but stopped short. In the young man's thoughts, meanwhile, there was only one thing. He was very afraid that he would not be able to control himself, but he still did not tell Miko about this. Night fell, but the writer could not fall asleep, so he just lay there without moving. And then Subai asked the girl if they really needed to lie so close, because it made him very uncomfortable. Then the heroine answered that she definitely would, because even though she was not very strong, she could definitely give him a couple of minutes to escape if necessary. The young man thought that it was Yu Yin who needed to run away from him, and then he remembered that there was a lot of work to do tomorrow, so he needed to try to get some sleep. So the writer began to count the sheep, among which appeared a sheep with the face of Manhwa. Because of this, the guy started thinking about the girl, and then he remembered how firm her buttocks were. The young man himself felt uncomfortable with what he was thinking, so he tried to drive all unnecessary thoughts out of his head. There was no way Yu Yin's boyfriend could kick her out, because if the shaman kicked Miko out, they would definitely laugh at her, and Subai didn't want that. The shaman decided that since he couldn't sleep, he would spend time pumping up his healing. He is not going to ask anyone, so he will practice on himself, because he must be ready for anything, and therefore he is obliged to increase the level of treatment. The young man started with a small cut on his finger, because one should always start small. After this, Subai applied the treatment, beginning to develop it to save lives in the future.